The arrival. Ambassador Rand stood at the observation deck of the Weaver, his mind racing as the starship approached Earth. The planet appeared before him, a vibrant blue and green ball hanging in the void, but it was the peculiar readings on the sensors that troubled him. The Weaver's systems were top tier, far more advanced than anything the humans could possibly possess, and yet the planet had detected their arrival faster than any species they had previously encountered. Something was off, and it was growing more apparent by the second. Tekla, his science officer, stood beside him, her tentacles flitting over the control panel. Her emerald eyes, sharp and observant, flickered with concern. "Ambassador, these readings are unusual. I've never seen anything like it." Rand glanced at her, his iridescent scales shifting color from deep blue to a pale green. "What do you mean, unusual?" Tekla didn't respond immediately, her gaze narrowing as she ran another series of tests. The humans' technology levels are a contradiction. Their cities are powered by basic electrical grids, yet they're capable of manipulating antimatter. They've mastered quantum entanglement for communication, but they still rely on fossil fuels for energy production. Their development seems completely erratic, like they've deliberately mixed the old with the new. Rand felt a chill run through him despite the heat of the observation room. He'd dealt with many civilizations in his time, and it was clear that the humans were unlike any he had encountered before. Most species followed a predictable path, beginning with basic technologies, then advancing through stages of industrial, scientific, and cosmic discovery. But the humans, their development was anything but linear. It was as if they had one foot in their past and another in their future. "What are you suggesting?" Rand asked, his voice steady, though doubt tugged at the edges of his thoughts. Tekla hesitated. "I can't say for sure. Perhaps they've advanced at an extraordinary rate, skipping over certain stages of evolution. Or maybe there's something deeper here that we're missing." Her tone was full of uncertainty. The more she investigated, the more questions piled up, and Rand knew that if Tekla couldn't find a solid explanation, then they were truly facing an enigma. "Keep monitoring their systems," Rand ordered, though his mind was already racing with theories. Could it be that the humans had tapped into something ancient, something beyond even the Centurion's knowledge? Perhaps the reason their technology was so erratic was because they had uncovered lost knowledge from some forgotten time, some ancient age that was beyond any record or study. As the Weaver neared Earth's atmosphere, Rand couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something far larger than a simple diplomatic mission. His decades of experience as a diplomat had prepared him for all types of encounters. But this felt different. Earth was not just another planet. It was a puzzle, a mystery, and he was no closer to understanding it than when they first entered the solar system. The ship descended, its engines humbling in their precision. Yet Rand's mind was focused on the most pressing issue: the human response. Earth was supposed to be a relatively primitive world, one that had just begun to explore space in the last few centuries. Yet, somehow, they were aware of the Centurion ship's arrival before it even breached their atmosphere. Tekla looked up from her station, her tentacles wriggling nervously. "Ambassador, they know we're coming." Rand stiffened. "How?" "I'm still trying to decipher their communications, but they're aware of our ship. They've even adjusted their landing site in Nevada to be perfectly aligned with our descent." Tekla paused, her expression turning troubled. "That's impossible. They shouldn't have the technology to detect us." Rand's heart raced as the realization set in. Not only had the humans detected the arrival of the Weaver, but they had somehow known exactly where it would land. Their military capabilities were not advanced enough for this kind of detection. At least, that's what Rand had believed. He exchanged a glance with Tekla, and for the first time in centuries, doubt crept into his mind. The humans weren't just an emerging species. They weren't simply an upstart civilization trying to climb the ladder of cosmic advancement. No, these humans, with their contradictory technologies and their uncanny ability to predict the movements of a highly advanced starship, were something entirely different. something ancient. The Weaver glided through the clouds, the desert landscape below beginning to take shape. Nevada, with its vast empty spaces and rugged terrain, was a perfect location for the ship to make its descent. As the landing ramp lowered and the crew prepared to disembark, Rand tried to steady his thoughts. If the humans had truly expected them, there had to be an explanation, one that went far beyond simple technological leaps. The ship settled into the hot desert sand with a soft thud, and the crew, now outfitted in their diplomatic gear, made their way to the landing ramp. The desert heat washed over them as they stepped out, the bright sunlight glinting off their shimmering exoskeletons and reflective clothing. There, waiting for them, stood 3 humans, a man and 2 women. None of them wore uniforms, no elaborate greeting party, no banners, no signs of excitement. They simply stood, calm and collected, waiting. The man in the center raised a hand in greeting, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. Ambassador Rand was taken aback by the complete lack of fanfare. He had expected a more theatrical reception. An eager government official, perhaps a military representative, maybe even a crowd of onlookers. But instead, there were just these 3 people standing in the desert, as if they were accustomed to visitors from the stars. The man stepped forward, his voice calm but assertive as he addressed Rand. "We've been expecting you," he said in flawless Centurion. Rand's scales flickered in surprise. "You? What?" The man's eyes glinted with quiet amusement. "We knew you'd come. We've been waiting for this moment for a long time." The hidden legacy. The 3 humans stood motionless in the scorching desert heat, their gazes fixed on Ambassador Rand and his entourage. The man who spoke, dressed in simple yet meticulously clean clothing, had an air of quiet authority. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the usual excitement or confusion that the Centurion diplomats had grown accustomed to during first contact scenarios. Rand, still reeling from the unexpected greeting, took a step forward, his curiosity piqued. "You say you've been expecting us," Rand began, his voice steady but filled with a new sense of caution. "Explain how you knew." The man gave a slight nod, acknowledging the question, but his reply was not immediate. Instead, he turned to one of the women standing beside him, the one with long, dark hair, and whispered something in a language that Rand didn't understand. A moment later, she produced a small device, no larger than a pocket-sized tablet, from the folds of her clothing. It emitted a soft blue glow as she tapped the surface, activating it. Without warning, the device projected a holographic map of Earth, with detailed lines and markers tracing various points on the planet's surface. But there was something odd about the map. It wasn't just a standard Earth map. This one had markers that moved in real time, following the positions of their ships and even predicting where the Weaver would land, down to the last meter. Rand's eyes widened as the human man spoke again, his voice calm but carrying an unsettling weight. "This isn't the first time we've had visitors, Ambassador. Your arrival has been anticipated for centuries. We have knowledge that extends far beyond what you may believe." The hologram flickered and shifted, showing ancient symbols and star maps that Rand didn't recognize. They weren't human in origin, at least, not in any sense he had encountered in his diplomatic work. The symbols seemed almost alien, but somehow their structure felt strangely familiar, as though they were part of a forgotten, lost language, perhaps even one that predated the Centurion civilization. "You're not just using primitive technology," Rand said slowly, his mind racing to process the implications. "This map, this technology, it's beyond your time. Who taught you this? Where did this come from?" The man smiled faintly, his eyes glinting with a knowing look that unsettled Rand even more. "We've learned it over time, through ancient sources that tell us of a time when Earth was not the quiet backwater planet you see today, but a hub of knowledge and power that spanned across the stars." Rand's heart skipped a beat. A hub? Earth? That's not possible. The humans are. They are just emerging from their Stone Age. They've only recently begun exploring space. The woman beside the man, the one with short cropped blonde hair, spoke up. Her voice was low and serious, carrying the weight of centuries of history. You misunderstand, Ambassador. Earth's past is not what you think. The humans of today are only a fragment of what once was. We are the last remnants of a civilization that spanned galaxies, and we have been waiting for the moment when our legacy could be revealed. The revelation struck Rand like a hammer blow. A civilization that spanned galaxies. It was preposterous, yet the evidence before him, the map, the symbols, the advanced technology, suggested that it might be true. The humans, it seemed, had been guarding a secret far larger than any of the Centurion diplomats had ever imagined. We don't understand, Tekla murmured from behind him, her voice edged with disbelief. How can this be? How could a primitive species like humans have such knowledge? The man turned to Tekla, his expression softening. Because, Tekla, the humans aren't what you think they are. We are not just the species you see now. We are the descendants of the Ancient Ones, the true architects of this galaxy. Our ancestors created the first warp drives, the first systems of interstellar communication, and we left behind remnants, pieces of our technology, scattered across the stars. We were once the masters of the cosmos, but for reasons we still don't fully understand, we were lost to time. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. Rand, who had traveled to countless worlds and had witnessed many strange phenomena, couldn't quite wrap his mind around what the humans were telling him. Could it be true? Had Earth, in its primitive state, once been the center of such advanced civilization? It seemed unfathomable. The woman with the dark hair stepped forward, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. She looked at Rand with a mixture of caution and resolve. We've only begun to uncover the extent of our ancient history. The records are fragmented, scattered in the deep recesses of Earth's history. But we know enough to understand that we are not the first inhabitants of this planet. We are the inheritors of a great and terrible legacy. A legacy that, in some ways, is linked to you and your people. Rand blinked in surprise. Linked to us? How? The woman's gaze was steady, unflinching. Your people, the Centurions, are not as distant from us as you might think. Our ancient ancestors encountered your kind long before your civilization rose to prominence, and some of your species may have even been involved in our fall. A chill ran through Rand's body. The implications of her words were staggering. Could it be that the Centurions, in their own distant past, had played a role in the rise, or fall, of humanity's once great civilization? If so, what had become of it? And what had led to Earth's descent into what it was now? An isolated world, with its people barely scratching the surface of their own potential. The man, sensing the weight of Rand's thoughts, continued. We are the last remnants of a once great civilization, a civilization that was wiped out by its own hubris. We've been in hiding, biding our time, waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. And now that moment has come. But it's not just about us. It's about the future of humanity. Rand took a step forward, his mind racing. The future. What do you mean? The truth of our legacy, Ambassador, is tied to the survival of your species, the man replied. Humanity's future is not just about reclaiming what was lost. It's about unlocking the potential that lies within you. The ancient power is dormant within Earth's core, and if you help us awaken it, you will realize your true place in the galaxy. Tekla, her tentacles twitching with excitement, stepped forward. You're saying that humans are capable of something far greater than we imagined, that their destiny is connected to something beyond this planet. The man nodded gravely. Yes, you've already seen the anomalies. Your own ship's systems were affected by Earth's unknown energies. The question is whether humanity can rise to the challenge, reclaim their legacy, and take their rightful place among the stars. Unveiling the past. The sun hummed low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert as the Centurion delegation moved deeper into the strange encampment. The humans, silent but watchful, led the way toward a series of ancient-looking structures that blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Despite their advanced technology, the buildings here were an odd mix of organic and mechanical materials, with intricate carvings covering every surface, symbols, geometric patterns, and abstract designs that seemed to pulse faintly with energy. Rand walked at the front of the group, his mind reeling from the revelations they had already encountered. The implications of what the humans had said were profound. Earth, the isolated primitive planet, had once been the cradle of an interstellar civilization. It seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet everything he saw, the holographic maps, the ancient symbols, the advanced technology, suggested that the truth was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. "We'll show you more of our legacy," the man, who had introduced himself as Elias, said as he turned to glance back at the group. "But first, you must understand why we've kept ourselves hidden for so long. Why we've remained in the shadows." Rand nodded, his curiosity burning even brighter now. "I can understand. If you had such advanced knowledge and power, why retreat? Why hide from the universe?" Elias sighed, a deep, almost sorrowful sound, and led them toward the center of the strange complex. They'd reached an enormous structure, unlike anything Rand had seen on Centuria or any other planet. It was made of smooth, dark metal, but it shimmered with a strange, almost organic glow, as though it were alive. The entrance was guarded by massive stone doors, carved with the same symbols that Rand had seen before. "We didn't choose to hide," Elias explained, his voice heavy with emotion. "It was forced upon us. We were betrayed, not just by our own people, but by those we trusted the most." The doors slowly parted as Elias approached, revealing a large chamber within. Inside, the air was thick with the weight of history. The walls were lined with ancient relics, artifacts from a time long past, each one a testament to the power and ambition of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. At the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, upon which rested a glowing orb, pulsating with a steady rhythm. Rand stepped forward, his breath catching in his throat as the orb flickered in the dim light. There was something deeply familiar about it, as though it were calling to him, as though it held the answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. "This," Elias said softly, "is the heart of our civilization, the core. It is the source of all our power, the catalyst that fueled our rise, and the cause of our fall." Rand stared at the orb, mesmerized by its energy. He could feel a subtle pull, a gravitational force that seemed to reach into the very core of his being, urging him closer. But he resisted the urge to touch it, knowing that whatever it was far beyond his understanding. "What happened?" Tekla asked, her voice trembling slightly. "How did you fall?" Elias closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving painful memories. The core was the key to everything. It was the source of our civilization's power, but it was also the reason for our destruction. We relied too heavily on it, and in our arrogance, we pushed its capabilities too far. We awakened something that had been dormant for eons. Rand exchanged a glance with his crew, the tension in the air palpable. "What did you awaken?" he asked, his voice a mix of fear and curiosity. Elias took a deep breath. "A force older than our civilization, a force we couldn't control." The core was not just a power source. It was a gateway to something that we should never have disturbed. We opened the door, and in doing so, we invited a darkness into our world. The room fell silent as the weight of Elias's words settled over the group. Rand could see the haunted look in his eyes, the guilt, the regret, the knowledge that their ancestors' actions had led to their downfall. "We tried to close the gate," Elias continued, his voice growing strained. "But by then, it was too late. The darkness had already taken root. The core was corrupted, and so was our civilization. It was destroyed from within, consumed by the very power we had sought to control." Tekla shuddered at the thought. And the remnants of this darkness, it still exists. Elias nodded grimly. Yes, the core is still active, but its power is unstable. It pulses with a strange energy, a mix of creation and destruction. We've spent centuries trying to understand it, but its true nature remains elusive. All we know is that it is the key to humanity's survival. But if it is not controlled, it could destroy everything once again. Rand stepped closer to the orb, his heart pounding in his chest. And you want us to help you control it, to understand it. Elias looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. Yes, but it is not just about controlling the core. It is about understanding the legacy of humanity, the ancient knowledge that was lost. You, Centurions, are the key to unlocking that knowledge. Rand shook his head, confused. How are we involved in all of this? We are just a small part of this universe. Not anymore, Elias replied softly. Your people have already felt the pull of Earth's energy. The anomalies in your ships, the disturbances in your systems, they were not accidents. They were a sign. The Centurions were always meant to find us, to uncover the truth. But you must decide if you are ready to face what lies ahead. Are you ready to accept the responsibility that comes with this knowledge? Tekla stepped forward, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. What responsibility? What are you asking of us? Elias turned to her, his expression unwavering. I am asking you to help humanity reclaim its place in the galaxy. I am asking you to help us unlock the full potential of the core. But be warned, the darkness that was unleashed is still out there, waiting. If you fail, the consequences will be catastrophic, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was thick with tension, the weight of Elias's words hanging heavy in the air. Rand felt the enormity of the decision before them. If they chose to help, they would be taking on a responsibility far greater than any they had ever faced before. But if they refused, the consequences could be just as devastating. Finally, Rand spoke, his voice steady but resolute. We will help you. We will uncover the truth. But we need to understand everything. All of it. No more secrets. Elias's expression softened, and he nodded. I will tell you everything, Ambassador. But first, you must understand the true nature of the core. And to do that, you will have to face the darkness that still lingers within it. The room fell silent once more, as the pulse of the orb grew stronger, its light flickering like the heartbeat of a living creature. What lay ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. Their journey into the heart of humanity's lost legacy had only just begun. Into the abyss. The quiet hum of the core reverberated through the chamber, almost as if it were alive. Its pulsating glow filled the room, casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls, and despite the sense of urgency hanging in the air, Rand felt a strange sense of awe. This was it, the heart of humanity's forgotten legacy. This was the key to understanding what had happened to Earth's once great civilization and why it had collapsed in such spectacular fashion. Elias, standing beside the core, seemed lost in thought. His gaze was distant, as if he were staring through time itself, trying to piece together the fragmented history that had led to this moment. His voice, when it came, was low and heavy with the weight of centuries. There's more to the core than what we've shown you, Elias began, his eyes flickering to Rand. You've felt its power, but what you haven't yet sensed is the curse it carries. It's not just a source of energy, it's a prison. The core holds something that has been locked away for millennia. Rand's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean a prison? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elias hesitated, as though weighing the consequences of his words. It holds the essence of the entity that we awakened, the darkness that nearly destroyed our civilization. The core is its containment vessel, its prison. But as the centuries passed, it began to crack, and the entity within, it's stirring. It's trying to break free. Tekla, ever the skeptic, stepped forward, her brow furrowed. What entity? What exactly is it? Elias turned his gaze to the floor, unable, or unwilling, to meet her eyes. It's a beam older than the galaxy itself. It predates our civilization, the Centurions, even the existence of many of the species you know today. We called it the Nihil. It was a force of pure entropy, an ancient entity that sought nothing but destruction and decay. It was drawn to the power we discovered in the core, and it fed on it, growing stronger with every passing year. Entropy. Tekla echoed, her voice filled with disbelief. A creature of pure destruction. Not just destruction, Elias said, his voice now cold and distant. The Nihil is a force of undoing. It is the opposite of creation. The energy it consumes is not just turned to dust, it's erased. It's as though the very fabric of reality itself is unraveling when it touches something. Rand felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of an entity that could erase existence itself seemed impossible, yet the truth in Elias's voice left little room for doubt. Whatever they were dealing with here, it was beyond anything they could have anticipated. Elias took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for what he was about to reveal. The Nihil was bound within the core, but over the years, its influence began to seep out. First, it was small, disruptions in the power grid, anomalies in our systems. But then, it grew. It infected our minds, twisted our desires, and corrupted our civilization from within. Those who were not strong enough to resist its pull began to worship it, to call it the end of all things, and they believed that its release would bring about a new order, a rebirth from destruction. Rand's mind raced. The idea of a cult worshipping such an entity seemed too absurd to be real, and yet he could see how it might happen. Fear, desperation, the promise of power. These were the things that led civilizations down dark paths. But why didn't you stop it? Tekla asked, her voice tinged with anger. Why didn't you contain it before it spread so far? Elias's eyes darkened. We tried. But the Nihil's influence is insidious. It manipulates thought, warps the very nature of reality. Those who tried to fight it became its vessels. They were overtaken. Those who remained loyal to the cause, they were outnumbered, outgunned. And when the Nihil began to break free from the core, it was too late. The damage had been done. Our people were already lost. Rand took a step forward, his mind reeling with the implications of what Elias had said. This wasn't just a simple technological failure. This was something much darker, something that had the power to erase all existence. The Nihil was more than just a threat. It was a force of cosmic imbalance, and its escape could bring an end to everything they knew. Elias's voice cut through Rand's thoughts. We've hidden ourselves here on Earth to protect what little remains of our people, but we cannot stop it alone. The Nihil is already waking, and its influence is spreading. The Centurions are the only ones who can help us. Rand swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do you need us to do? Elias's eyes met his, and for the first time, Rand saw a flicker of hope. You must help us stabilize the core. You must help us seal the Nihil away before it escapes completely. You have the technology, the expertise to do what we cannot. We've tried, but we are too few, and the darkness is too powerful. Only with your help can we save the galaxy, and possibly the universe itself. Tekla shook her head in disbelief. And what if we fail? What if we can't contain it? What happens then? Elias's expression grew somber. If we fail, the Nihil will break free, and it will begin to consume everything. Worlds, stars, even entire galaxies. It will erase existence, and there will be nothing left but emptiness. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. The group stood in silence for a long moment, each person lost in their own thoughts. The task before them seemed impossible. How could they contain such a force? How could they face an entity that had destroyed an entire civilization? But Rand knew they had no choice. The universe was at stake, and he could see the determination in Elias's eyes. This wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about saving everything. Finally, Rand spoke. "We'll do it. We'll help you." Elias's expression softened, and for a brief moment, a look of gratitude passed between them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But you must understand, this will not be easy. The Nihil will fight back. It will try to break your will, to turn you against each other. You will face horrors that you cannot imagine. But if you succeed, you will be remembered as the ones who saved all of existence." With those words, Elias turned toward the pedestal that held the core, his hand reaching out to touch it. As his fingers made contact with the orb, the room trembled, and a deep, resonating hum filled the chamber. The energy within the core surged, and for the first time, Rand felt the full force of its power. It was as if the entire universe was holding its breath. "The path ahead is fraught with danger," Elias said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "But if we are to survive, we must face the Nihil together." As the light from the core intensified, Rand steeled himself for the journey ahead. The stakes had never been higher. The fate of everything they knew was now in their hands, and there would be no turning back. The final countdown. The space station's corridors hummed with a low, constant thrum that reverberated in the bones of everyone aboard. Despite the high-tech equipment and powerful machinery, there was an eerie quality to the atmosphere, an unsettling quietness that clung to the air. The team had been working for days now, preparing for what could be the most dangerous mission humanity had ever faced. They had no choice but to continue. Elias had been working nonstop, coordinating with the remaining survivors from his civilization, trying to gather every resource, every piece of technology that might help them seal the Nihil once and for all. They had already calculated the risks, and the data they had gathered was clear. The core was reaching critical mass. It was no longer just a power source. It was becoming a ticking time bomb, one that would explode in a way that no one could predict, erasing everything it touched in an instant. "Are we ready?" Rand asked, his voice cutting through the hum of the station as he walked into the main control room, where Elias, Tekler, and the others were gathered. The faces of his crew members were drawn, exhausted from the pressure, but determined. This was their last shot, and failure was not an option. Elias turned from the holographic display, his expression grave. "We have the equipment, the coordinates, and the calculations, but it's not just a matter of being ready. The Nihil is waking up. It's beginning to interact with the core in ways we don't fully understand. It's trying to reach out, trying to spread its influence, and we don't know if our technology can withstand its force." Tekler, standing at the console, glanced up. "We can't keep stalling. We have to try." She typed rapidly into the system, bringing up the latest readings from the core. "If we wait too long, we're not going to have enough time to set up the containment field. We have one shot at this, and it has to work. The Nihil is pushing back against everything we've tried, and it's getting stronger." Rand looked at her, his thoughts racing. Tekler had always been the pragmatist, the one who focused on the cold, hard facts. But this time, even she couldn't mask the fear that had started to creep into her eyes. There were no guarantees here. This wasn't a mission where success was even remotely assured. "Have we figured out how the Nihil is affecting the core?" Rand asked, trying to focus his thoughts. Elias nodded, though his eyes were tired, as if he'd aged 100 years in the span of a few days. "We've traced its influence. The Nihil's power isn't just a destructive force. It's a manipulator of space and time itself. The more it interacts with the core, the more the very fabric of reality begins to warp. We're seeing anomalies in the data, things that shouldn't be happening." Tekler jumped in. "It's creating rifts in space and time. We've been monitoring these fluctuations, but we're still not sure how to counteract them." "Rifts?" Rand echoed. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," Elias replied, his voice steady, but edged with fear, "that we're playing with forces far beyond our understanding. These rifts, they could be tears in the very fabric of existence. If we fail, they'll expand, and reality itself could begin to unravel." Rand felt a wave of dread wash over him. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences of failure were unimaginable. There was no room for error here. There would be no second chances. He turned to the rest of the team. Then we need to make sure the first attempt is the only one we need. No mistakes. No hesitation. Tekla nodded, her jaw set with determination. I'll finalize the containment protocols. We've got a series of fail-safes, but I need to make sure the encryption is foolproof. If the Nihil tries to influence our systems, we need to lock it out completely. Rand placed a hand on her shoulder. You're the best at this. We'll get it done. Elias stepped forward, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. There's one more thing you need to know. His voice was grim. As the Nihil's power grows, its influence over our minds intensifies. You may experience hallucinations, visions of things that are not real. You will hear voices, see people you think you know. It will try to break you down from within. This is not just a physical battle. It will fight you mentally, emotionally. It wants to turn you against each other, make you question everything. Rand's heart skipped a beat. How do we fight that? Elias's eyes softened, and for a moment, Rand could see the sorrow in his expression. You don't fight it with technology or firepower. You fight it with willpower. Trust each other. Trust yourselves. That's the only way to overcome it. The room was silent for a moment as the weight of his words sank in. The Nihil was not just a monster to be fought. It was a test of the crew's very humanity, of their ability to hold on to what made them who they were. It was going to take everything they had to resist its influence. Finally, Rand broke the silence. Then let's go. We don't have much time. The team moved quickly, falling into their respective roles. Elias guided them to the central chamber where the core was located, the heart of their mission. The deep, resonating hum from the core had grown louder, almost deafening. Rand could feel it in his bones, a sense of unease that gnawed at him with each step. The closer they got, the more he could feel the weight of the impending confrontation. They entered the control room, where the core sat in the center, its swirling energy shifting and crackling with unpredictable intensity. The air around it was thick with power, and Rand could feel the overwhelming pull of the Nihil's presence, as if it were watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Tekla immediately went to the main console, typing furiously as she began inputting the final command sequences. The others spread out, checking the equipment and making sure everything was in place. Elias stood by the pedestal, his face etched with sorrow and fear. Once we initiate the containment field, there's no turning back. The Nihil will fight to the last breath. We cannot afford any missteps. Rand nodded, his throat tight. The tension in the room was palpable. They were on the brink of something catastrophic, something that could change everything. Ready? Tekla asked, her fingers hovering over the final command. Rand took a deep breath. Ready. Commencing activation, she said, pressing the button. The core flared to life, its energy surging in a blinding pulse that lit up the entire room. The air seemed to crackle with tension as the containment field began to form. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and for a moment, Rand thought he could hear a whisper in the back of his mind, distant but unmistakable. No. Focus. He clenched his fists, fighting against the mental intrusion. Elias's warning echoed in his mind, but he pushed it away. They had trained for this. They had prepared for the impossible, and they would not fail.